because now we've got Lars Samuelson from Lund University, here locally, who's gonna talk nanotechnology with us, and in particular, how we extract and how we use it when it comes to energy. Wonderful. Lars, all over to you. Give him a warm welcome.
Yes, this is on. Thank you very much for the introduction. So I am local from the physics department here in Lund. Let's see if I can handle this. I am from a center called Nano Lund, in which we do very interdisciplinary research on nanoscience and nanotechnology in general, but very much starting out of material science and nanotechnology, enabling a lot of basic research, basic science, but also applications. And I'll talk about two of those of relevance to the sustainable energy theme here, the lighting and the energy to the world aspect. As I said, I've been spending 25 years on building up this center for Nano Lund. That was not a good laser. I think I have something better here. Maybe. But I've also, besides that, I've been spending time setting up companies in Ideon Science Park, especially these 4 companies. Q-Nano, Solidstate, Glow, and Hexagen maybe. All of them based on unique materials, nanotechnology, and then enabling different kinds of applications. We are right now in the middle of the summer. This week, especially tomorrow, we're going to celebrate this fellow. So let me first introduce the sun. There should be some sound here. I don't know if the sound is working. Thank you very much. Everyone knows the song. This is not the traditional midsummer song, but it's relevant. So I'm going to talk about the sun from the point of view. It's a model system for an ideal lamp. It's also providing us with light that our eyes have developed for, that are ideally suited for our eyes' needs of light. It's also providing the Earth with its most abundant energy source. You can say that when we talk about wind is of course a rather small percentage fraction of the energy that lands on the Earth from the sun. My first talk is to say a little bit about why is it that the sun is defining the spectral characteristics and the needs for our eyes, and that has to do with a little bit physics here, the intensity, the amount of photons that come out as a function of the wavelength of light. You see here 1 micron, 2 microns, and in this range here between 400 and 700 nanometers, that's where we have the visible part of light that we can see. This is the so-called black body radiation, and it's distributed like this, specific to the fact that the sun has a temperature of 6,000 Kelvin or 5,500 degrees C. It is far away. Maybe that's good for us because it's damned hot there. So I can say that what we need is to be able to provide ourselves with a light source that can mimic these spectral characteristics, and I spent a few minutes on that. We have a couple of alternatives for this challenge to make a nice and efficient light source, where they're resembling the solar radiation. One thing we could try to do is to directly mimic it by creating a hot lamp, a filament lamp, like an incandescent lamp. It sounds like a good idea. However, a lamp like that you cannot really make much hotter than 2,500 degrees C. That corresponds to 3,000 Kelvin. And you can see here that the fraction of the light from an incandescent lamp is around 4% that falls in the visible. So it's an enormous waste of energy. So from any point of view, that is not acceptable. So you have a second alternative that you can go after, that we and many others do. Namely, you could replace this with 3 well-selected, more or less monochromatic light sources, say a blue lamp, a green lamp, and a red lamp. If you could put those together, which I will show you in a minute, you can actually get a perfect replacement to a color temperature tuned and optimized lamp that is very attractive to our eyes and fills the purpose of what we need for illumination. Here's an example of how you combine the red and the blue and the green, and you can get white, and here's an actual photograph of LEDs of these different colors producing a nice white light. A little bit physics again. The sun is creating light because it's very hot, and in general, systems that emit light can be atoms, can be molecules, can be crystals. Typically you do that because you excite an electronic system. You can do that thermally. You excite the electron to an excited state, and then it sits around there for a while, and then it falls back down. This is now energy going upwards, and this energy difference between these two energy states comes out as a photon, and the color of the photon is then specific to the energy gap between these two states. So one of the challenges, one way of describing the challenge we have is, can we create a light source that is not based on it being extremely hot, but instead is designed more smartly? I say that by semiconductor nanotechnology, the type of stuff that we do, we can build a light-emitting diode in which we can electrically produce this configuration. In principle, in this way, you have the two energy level system again, as you had in this pedagogical case, and you actually can feed in, say, electrons to this upper state and feed in an emptiness of the lower state. And if you could do that, then you have exactly the same state as you had in the sun, for instance, and out comes light. But now you haven't been forced to heat something up to 5,500 degrees C. You just, by some clever technical tricks, you could feed in charge carriers, electrons in principle, to these levels, and out comes light. So how do we do that? How is that accomplished? This late of the day, I'm not going to do deep semiconductor physics, but you can say that a semiconductor is characteristic if it has, in principle, two energy levels, one carrying electrons, negatively charged electrons, like in Max 4, they have electrons there, and one other energy level that only carries what we call holes, which are positive or empty electron states. So this is now the type of device that everything is built on in the time of semiconductor applications that I talk about. We call this a diode. A diode is a rectifying device. You can rectify current. It allows current to go through it in one direction and not in the opposite direction. So what you can do is to apply a voltage to this device, and then you actually allow electrons to be injected and these holes to be injected, and right here you can produce exactly the same type of energy configuration as you had in the sun or in the hot lamp. And depending on how you design and choose your semiconductor to be, you can do that with a light-emitting diode that produces either blue light or green light or yellow light or red light. That is the background. So why do we have to go into this effort? I'll talk a little bit about the area of lighting in general. This is an aerial picture. It looks a bit strange to me how you could be black all over at the same time, but I think it's some trick to this. It shows where you have a lot of light, artificial light in Europe and in the US and in Japan and Korea, etc., and in China. What is crucial here from an energy efficiency point of view is that around 25% of the electricity around the world, specifically in the Western world, is used for either lighting or for displays. Here's a historical picture. Here you see the year from 1700, 1800, 1900, and 2000, how technology development has been feeding in resources for humans' need for light. Here is a strange measure here. It's called teralumen hours per year. You can spend some time on thinking what that means. But anyway, the graph is pretty clear. For a long, long time, candles was really all we had. As time went on, there was development of the natural gas, or gas that was used in gas lights. Actually, that went all the way up deep into the 1900s. Kerosene is still used in many places of the world, but not in this part of the world. And of course, the electricity-based lamps came around 1900 or the end of the 1800s. So today, that's of course almost everything that we have. So now, the incandescent lamps came, as I said, at the end of the 1800s. You can see here the efficiency of the glödlampa, the incandescent lamp. It was from the beginning very, very small, like a 1/10 of a percent. Oh, sorry, here is fire. Sorry, the incandescent lamp started at around 1%, 0.01 efficiency. And it was developed rather quickly, but it had this saturation at around 4%. That was actually what I showed with these black body radiation characteristics, that you couldn't get much more visible light out of an incandescent lamp that you could actually produce on Earth. So before that was fire, yes, and then you have discharge lamps that can be quite efficient, but have their other limitations. But really, today, what everyone is working on, not only IKEA, I think IKEA has been very much forward-looking by, in principle, taking out all other light sources than LED-based lamps. But you can see here that rather early one could do red LEDs, around 1960, 1970, and then came the blue LEDs, and today we have blue LEDs that are very efficient. They can be up to more than 50% efficient. This is now the efficiency of transforming the input electrical power to light, to photons coming out. The green is not so efficient at all, but the red can also be very efficient. So that is the situation we have. We call this type of lighting solid-state lighting because it's based on solid-state semiconductor light-emitting diodes. So this has been going on, and it was quite impressive. I actually spent part of my time in the Royal Swedish Academy, and we decided a few years ago in 2014 to say that this was really very, very important for mankind, that you could do this efficient lighting by creating white light. Same time, the cost for this type of technology had gone down, so we said that indeed this was worthy of the Nobel Prize in Physics. I think many of you are aware of that. That Professor Sakazaki and Amano from Nagoya and Shuichi Nakamura, who is now in Santa Barbara, originally he was with Nichiya in Japan, they got the Nobel Prize in Physics for the invention of the efficient blue light emitting diode, which has enabled bright and energy-saving white light sources. I think many of you are aware of that. So that happened in 2014, and there was also, this is actually a picture that I think it came from Sydsvenska Dagbladet, where I compared the incandescent lamp, glödlampan, with the lighting tube, the lysrörslampa, and the light-emitting diode lamp, where you could have the same type of optical power if you compare a 40-watt incandescent lamp with a 7-watt light tube lamp with a 4-watt power-consuming LED lamp. So that's one of the differences. It is like a factor of 10 more efficient, than maybe more than a factor of 10. But maybe even more important, I think many of you have been climbing up on chairs and kitchen tables to replace these lamps because they have a short lifetime. Incandescent lamps, typically 1,000 hours. You can compare that with the 10,000 for the tubes and with 50 to 100,000 hours for the LED lamps. Some of you might say, well, actually the LED lamp doesn't really last that long, but that's not because of the LEDs. If that happens, it's because of the driver system. The driver system might be somewhat less ideal. So, I think many of you say, well, but they are not so nice. They have these cold color characteristics. I don't really like it. And some people say that the LEDs that are dominating the market today, they are actually created in this way that you have a blue LED. These are these very efficient ones with 50% efficiency, and they are pumping what is called a phosphorescence, a phosphor chemical, JAG, it's special chemistry, JAG-based phosphor. So what your eye is seeing is the combination of this blue original LED light characteristics and the green to yellow-red broad emission. This is quite okay for many applications where this rather cold light can be used, for instance, on bicycles or on your flashlights, or maybe even in your telephone flashlights. But there are many areas where this is not good enough. For instance, you're rather sensitive to the light characteristics in hospitals and in schools and in many other areas. For some applications, it's perfectly fine. Here's an example from the city of Los Angeles, where they replaced all their sodium high power lamps, that we've seen a lot, for instance, at the motorway going into Malmö, from Lund to Malmö. They have now replaced those with LEDs, and you see that although they are saving a lot of power, they get much higher light characteristics. So that's good. These kind of LEDs are good enough for that. Someone has said that they're good for street lights, for bicycle lamps, and in the men's room, but they would never be accepted in the women's room because the color characteristics is not good enough. We'll get to that in a minute. And so one of the applications of this controlled color temperature is for what we call human-centric lighting, where you can actually create an ideal spectral characteristics, where you can actually change between these blue or cold characteristic or to a warm characteristic with a dynamical control. Here's just an example for human-centric lighting, where you can, in a school class, for instance, have very energetic, energy-inducing lighting in the morning, melatonin suppression by the blue light, so people get very active and concentrated. You can also then tune the color characteristics depending on what the kids are going to do in this case, and when they're going to be calm and be relaxing, or when you get home Friday night, that may be the type of color characteristic you want to have in your home. So this is an important aspect. The human-centric lighting in our research right now is very much going in the direction of controlling, making advanced third-generation type of LED lamping systems. So the way to do that is to define, as I said, 3 LEDs, 1 blue, 1 green, and 1 red. And you can then combine them together. Here's one way of drawing it, with the red, green, and the blue, creating together the white light. Or you can have these types of a matrix of the green, the blue, and the red, and maybe the yellow, to make a very high quality white light. And if you can then control the components, the blue, green, and the red, then you can really get a very high, what is called color quality. So what can we do with nanotechnology? That's what we're working on. We're trying to help the technology, because the technology has saturated in this type of picture with something which we call the green valley. Here you see again the wavelength from 400 to 700, where you see that these gallium nitride, it is called, based LEDs can be very efficient, around 50%. Some material with the LEDs in the red can also be very efficient, but here in between, in the green and the yellow, is really very, very lousy. So that's what we're trying to improve on, to get very bright, both blue, green, and red LEDs. I will not try to expose you to too much of our physics or materials physics, but what we're doing is something called nanowires. These look like little rods. They're all little rods, but they are not what you can walk with, like walking sticks. These are typically 100 nanometers in diameter or less, and typically between 2 and 10 microns long, 2 and 5 micrometers long. Each of those that you can then design as an ideal LED. Actually, in this case, you do this diode as a radial p-n junction, which doesn't mean much to most of you, but anyway, that's what we do. The gallium nitride that is used today in the blue LEDs that got the Nobel Prize is actually extremely low quality. It's a lot of defects, a lot of dislocations. And that sets limitation what you can do with it. And it also says the planar technology means that you can't go to the long wavelength. You can't go from the blue to the green, to the yellow, and to the red. And that's what one would need to do. And we have this nanowire technology in which we can make LEDs on other crystal facets. This is sort of a symbol describing these rods with the top surface where today's LEDs are being made, but we make them on these side facets, which has many advantages and gives us a lot of freedom. Just to show you a nice SEM image. We're growing these as little rods, as I said. We grow them out of little holes in a mask. These holes are typically 50 to 100 nanometers in diameter. And very locally we nucleate the crystal of gallium nitride, and they grow into these very perfect rods. And the perfect rods that we can then use as a absolutely defect-free, dislocation-free material on which we can grow the complete LED structure. That's what we're doing. This is sort of a sketch of cartoon, of course. This is the original rod, and then we can grow radially the complete light-emitting diode, and still the system is completely dislocation-free, defect-free. So it allows us to make, this looks like little chess pieces. So each of this is a complete LED of this type. And together, when you make a macroscopic, this is sort of 50 micron size or so, you might have 10,000 or 100,000 such nano LEDs comprising the complete light source. So with this technology we have now in my lab in Lund, Nano Lund, the Solidstate Lighting Research Center, also in Glow AB, the company that I have created, we have created from Lund University, make now both blue, green, yellow and red LEDs. So together with this we have the basic technology to make very high quality light generation. I can say that Glow started out as a company here in Lund, in Ideon. We grew out of resources. We didn't have good enough lab spaces to move into. So we had actually to move the company with 90% of its activity to Silicon Valley. So Glow is now with almost 50 people in Silicon Valley developing this technology, while some of the basic research is still done here in Lund. So this technology now, what Glow is mainly working on, we are supporting with our material science, materials research, is for displays like our very popular smartphones, but also, you know, notebooks and desktops and tablets and all kinds of applications you can have of this technology. And what we can do here is to replace what is in most of these commercial machines, where you have white light pumping in from the sides, from the periphery here. We pump in RGB, RGB, RGB all around, and we can then selectively pump in the components of red and green and blue, both spatially and time-wise, in an ideal manner. So that's a big application area for this technology. In the future, we think we're going to see a revolution in general lighting, next generation of LED-based lighting, where you're not limited to bulb technology. You can have different kinds of light-emitting sheaths. You can have designed wallpaper that actually emit light, and you can do all kinds of interesting things. It's called architectural lighting, which is going to become a big thing. So this brings me now to the second topic. Here comes the sun again, this time without music. What we want to do is to save the earth and offer ideal, abundant, renewable energy source, of course. And the background to this is that around every square meter of earth that is illuminated with light from the sun receives typically 1 kilowatt per square meter. That's a lot of power. Actually, if you convert that to photons, the quantum of photons, it is 3, 6, 9, 10 to the 15 penta, something, yeah. Number of photons per square millimeter in a second. There's a lot of these quanta. But what we can do is to use the fact that here is a sketch of relative amount, the volume of the annual energy that comes from the sun. And you can see, compare that to what is existing on the earth in terms of coals that one could use for creating energy. Oil is about this much. Natural gas this much, and uranium this much, and then how much we actually use every year. You can see, if you're comparing some of these, you very quickly run into serious problems, which we're all aware of that have shared these days together. So there is a vision saying that if we could build power plants where we would, for instance, in Sahara use this, I can't exactly see how many square kilometers that is, but this is the right size of Sahara, and we collect the light there with today's technology, single crystalline silicon technology, then we could actually supply all the electricity that Europe needs. And if you would split up this surface, this would be the world need today for electricity. If you split that up, that would be 1 square in, say, Arizona or New Mexico, and that would be in Sahara, that would be in Australia, and that would be in China. Then we could actually have a continuous supply of electrical power that would be sufficient, and we will all be relying only on the renewable. So how does a solar cell work? I try to see comparisons with how things happen in nature. We talk a lot about photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, the photon comes in and hits a complicated molecule called chlorophyll. The chlorophyll absorbs very efficiently the photons and creates an electronic excitation. And exactly the way we talked about before, and this electronic excitation could lead to emission of light. That's not what's happening in the green leaf What is happening instead is that there are some clever molecular phenomena that forces the electron to run in one direction and the hole to run in the other direction. Still the same two-level picture that's supposed to be able to explain this. In a photovoltaic cell, we still have the same diode as I showed before. This was the one where if you apply bias from a battery, you could inject electrons and holes and make an LED, but that's not what you're doing in a solar cell called photovoltaic solar cell. Instead, you absorb photon, in comes the light, you absorb photons, and you create what we call electron-hole pairs. They are created in this region where you have actually, this means that you have a high electric field, and immediately, almost as quickly as what happened up here, electrons are forced to run in one direction, and the holes are forced to run in the other direction. That's exactly how you take care of the energy content in the photons that came in. So this charge separation leads to a current or to a voltage, depending on how you drive or you handle your solar cell, your solar panel, but you can then, for instance, run it through a lamp or a little fan, or you charge up your battery. The same physics, the same mechanism as in nature is really nothing new under the sun. So we have a lot of research going on in this area. Here's something we published that has been very much noticed, one of our most cited paper. We published that in Science 3 years ago, where we went from the world record at that time for these tiny little nanowire solar cells was 4%. We brought that up to 13.8. That goes on, we're far beyond that now. But that was a dramatic change. And the dramatic change was due to the fact that each of these little nanowires, here you see the semiconductor nanowires, is actually an optimally designed solar cell. So a nanowire that is only 150 nanometers across and 2 microns tall is very efficient, is almost 100% efficient in absorbing photons and then forcing the electrons to run in one direction and the holes to run in the other direction, and then you collect it in your solar cell technology. So this is the power of sustainable energy again, and this is an example of what we're doing together with another spin-out company that we still have here at Ideon. We don't have any intention to let it go away from Ideon, called Solidstate. And this is the part of the second technology, which is quite nice for being a physics professor. That was a science paper. This is a Nature paper in which we presented a completely new way of growing semiconductors. And you can say, why is that so interesting? Well, it's interesting because for many applications, like economy-sensitive applications like solar panels, most advanced semiconductor material is too expensive. This way of forming these nanowires is extremely efficient, it grows extremely fast, uses no expensive substrates, and so the cost for making these types of advanced semiconductor material is like 1% of the traditional way of producing semiconductors. This is also answering to another theme we're dealing with today, namely running out of raw materials or having the problems of the high cost of advanced materials. So this technology, what we call aerotex, that we publish in this Nature article, is now a big research activity in Lund University, and we have one of these big Wallenberg Foundation KW project called Aerotex, a revolutionary new way to grow semiconductor nanowire, funded by the KW Foundation. And in parallel, this technology, the outcome of this technology that we are working on has now been built in Ideon by Solidstate. Is now 5.5 meters tall. So it's somewhat upscaled, but also here at least 2-3 orders of magnitudes in the productivity. So I'm just going to summarize now. So this semiconductor technology and material science, it has been able to create the efficient and cold light. Doing fine. For the LEDs, you remember this, we had this diode again, we applied a battery, so we forced the electrons and the holes to meet, and out came photons. The other was to make these perfectly designed, optimally designed nanowires, and you could then take care of the photon-created electron-hole pairs by separating them and taking the energy out of them. So this is something we do primarily at Lund University, but also with these two spin-out companies, which adds extra spice to, I think, what we're doing. So the outlook for the future, this is part of, not exactly the title I used, nanoscience for the benefit of the developing world. This nanowire technology, is nanotechnology in material science, offers unique opportunities for creating or producing locally power, like in rural areas far from the grid, what we know as a grid. Solar panels today, they can be typically between 16 and 18, 19% efficient. With the technology we are adding on top of these types of silicon solar cells, it should go between 25 to 30% efficiency. So that's going to be a major improvement. So that illustrates the power of sustainable energy. And actually I took a picture this morning. Yes, outside the door we had this, the sign here says sustainability is our priority. I'm not speaking for Nissan, but 100% electric, 100% fun. I thought that was an excellent illustration that you offered. So this power can, for instance, be used for communication, not only by cars, but also in general communication, like mobile phone communication. But it's also the power, the ideal electrical power to drive low voltage lighting by the LEDs, to provide lighting, both indoor lighting and outdoor lighting, also where you're far away from the grid. We have heard several talks dealing with this. So this is now the power of the sustainable energy, where you can produce this on site. We're also developing these LEDs to go out into the ultraviolet, or specifically the UVC region, in which you can kill amoebas or destroy the DNA of dangerous things you can have in the drinking water. So we think with our UV LEDs, it's going to be an important breakthrough for creating drinkable water. I saw over there we have Water Sprint, actually have some connections with them as well. So this is now relating to another of our themes, namely the clean, accessible water, right? We also have a lot of research with these nanowires to actually do health monitoring via nanofluidic lab on chip. Here you see a lab on chip, a little device in which we're using nanotechnology and nanowires as part of this technology. And here we touch the third, I think, of these, ensuring healthy lives by this water control and actual health monitoring down close to the individual patient. The last thing is, right now, if you had been up there where I ran down from, we had a roundtable discussions about how can we optimally transform key enabling technologies like LEDs, like electronic, like semiconductors, from basic research into sustainable business. That was really the theme up there. And what we're doing here, now you see again the picture I think you've seen several times, Max Lab, ESS, and right in between is what we call Science Village Scandinavia. So right now we are setting up what we call Pro Nano. There's going to be a commercial entity in which nanotechnology pilot plant facilities for startup companies in this area will have ideal opportunities to develop their technology and go all the way from proof of concepts to all the way to proof of reproducibility and proof of economic survival and economic success. So this nice picture in the background, you have the city of Lund. So this is Lund University. It's also Nano Lund, where much of this technology comes from. So with that, I will again say, let there be light emitting diodes, let there be inexpensive and efficient solar cells. This technology that we have developed is then supported by all these agencies for the academic side in the last 15 years. Since I started this nanowire research, well over 1 billion Swedish kronor actually got into the basic science. An interesting thing is that above this red line are the commercial investors, the venture capital that have supported Glow and Solidstate by also in today well over 1 billion Swedish kronor. So these are now the academic research and the industrial development that goes well in pace, and there's a lot of mutual inspiration and support going back and forth, which I think is also an interesting thing. So before I conclude, let me first thank George Harrison for the music, and actually my son, because I picked up some of his guitar picking, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Lars, and what a nice song to almost wrap up this afternoon with. I always thought my solar cells in this watch, which is solar powered, were small, but now I realize they're actually huge. We're gonna open up for questions. We already see one who's very eager, but just before that, we got a few of our own. And I would like to ask you, because I've seen that every time the global capacity for solar cells has doubled, price has decreased by roughly 20%. And I was thinking this can't continue, but when I hear you, I'm thinking it's gonna be more. What's the answer?
Well, I think it's amazing the way the prices have gone down. In the last 5 years, it's really dropped to 20% of what it was. And already when it was 5 times higher, it was still realistic to, with small subsidies, develop the solar technology in Germany, as we all know. Today, all of Germany, they say, is economically viable without subsidies. And in Italy, I heard that it's like 15% that is now directly photovoltaics. Some estimations say that it would be small efforts to make at least 10%, at least most of Sweden, at least the southern half of Sweden would easily be, with small effort, you would have 10% electrical power from the solar panels.
Wow.
And I'm sure it's not only technology development, but it's really the volume of the market. It's probably driving even more than directly technology development. So it's the volume that in itself is actually pushing the prices down.
You mentioned Germany and a given, and I want to say a huge danke sehr to the Germans for helping to bring down the prices. And they've got it mainly house by house, roof by roof. Yes. But when I was in India, and India is also experiencing a massive change to solar now. I didn't see much of the solar, and I was disappointed, and I asked, how come I don't see it? And they said, well, we can't be as inefficient as the Germans. We don't do it house by house. We put massive solar installations in a few prices to get the prices down. But here it looks like we really can do it in many different places. What's the answer?
I think one thing that is coming is not really mature technology, is what is called building integrated photovoltaic, BIPV, where you, for instance, would cover every roof with panels. I know that actually IKEA has been selling these types of panels in the UK and in Switzerland. And that's a technology that seems to be doing well. That was still fairly low efficiency. But in other places, like in Japan, there is not really open space to do the huge power plants, so like you could probably do in India and some other places. There, the building-based photovoltaics is extremely important, and they have an enormous strong efforts there. Similarly, they have almost transformed to 100% to LED-based lighting, what I started out with. So that is really happening.
Go for it.
No, it is on.
It is? Okay, thank you. I must say that it's very nice that you're the final presenter on the main stage, because you really embody linking science and business, professors starting 4 companies that all contribute to a more sustainable world. I think that's very nice. But my question is, what stops more people, especially from academia, doing that? Is it, and please don't answer funding, what is the second on the list in case funding is number 1?
Well, indirectly it is of course funding, but it is, I think, initiatives, political initiatives, that makes it easier to transfer research to technology, to productification. You definitely need, if not money, you need the framework, like the ProNano. I mean, if you are a successful young researcher and you develop something that could become a company, and then you stand there, as I did 6 years ago, I was not so young, 6 years ago, and I had to move the company to Silicon Valley. So had there been a ProNano in Science Village Scandinavia, that's definitely where it would have gone. So the infrastructure is very important. And I think also there is a problem. It's not really money from political money, but it is making it easier with venture support, or capital that supports the companies during development. Because these types of industries, it's not like making your game companies where you just make some software development. This takes a lot of hardware, takes a long time. Typically these companies take somewhere between 8 and 15 years to develop. And the venture capital system we have today, the funding, still, doesn't really survive more than 6, 7, 8 years. And few companies make it in that time. Glow, as I said, is now 8, 9 years. And we can see that within 3 years, it's typically what you would expect. But now, that was also making it easier to go away from Sweden because there would be new capital coming in.
Thank you.
What about the limiting efficiency value for your nanowire devices? How far could you drive it?
Okay, it depends on how complicated systems you want to make. Right now, we have a big European program called Nanotandem. If we try to make tandem cells, so we take commercial state-of-the-art silicon solar panels and we put this nanowire thin film on top of it. Then we could transform an 18% efficient silicon cell to 27, 28%. But you can actually do multiple levels. Well, the trick with that, maybe I should say that, is that the top level film takes only the short wavelength, the high energy photons, and those that have lower energy, they just penetrate through and are absorbed by the silicon. Then you can use the optimal performance of both these different semiconductors. But you can do triple, and then you can get up to 35%, you could probably go beyond 40%. Actually, these satellite panels that you see up in space, they can be 35, 40%, but they are extremely expensive the way they are fabricated. They're not using aerotaxy or smart nanotechnology. Brute force materials growth, which is very expensive. But it's okay for the satellites.
May I just add, thinking about CSP, what is the temperature dependence of this efficiency?
Okay, there is clearly a temperature dependence that if you get up to about 40 degrees, the efficiency is going down, which is also a reason why concentrated PV has less of advantages, because then you heat up the material very much higher. It's a very predictable temperature dependence with the efficiency. So there is an optimization of where to go.
People are starting to come back from the other workshops and roundtables, but I want to ask you something that I think is relevant even to the people who didn't actually hear your seminar. Because we've been discussing about a lot these days and in the general public, energy storage. You didn't speak so much about it, but I gathered that a high percentage of photovoltaic or solar electricity needs good energy storage. How important is it, and what's your prediction for the future?
Well, I'd say it's really the most important development right now. I mean, what's happening with the solar photovoltaics is wonderful, but I mean, the limiting thing right now is really storage. So the battery development is going very fast. There's a lot of economical interest in it, and really, for instance, for the transportation, I mean, the combination of photovoltaics, efficient storage, local storage, and then the electrical vehicles is really an ideal, extremely environmentally friendly combination. So my guess is that 5, 10 years from now, we all want to have the storage, maybe even local storage of the light, what the sunlight is doing in the daytime, and charging up the local storage, and then you're charging your cars from that resource.
We can have it in the backyard or in the car.
Exactly.
Okay, well that would be nice, right? Less transportation for it as well.
And a little bit further from our own backyard is the Saharan context. That was in your presentation, and I think we've seen in presentations since the 80s. And every now and then there's like, yes, it's now going to happen. And actually this morning in Scientific News there was yes, now Saharan solar is going to happen.
Okay.
Is it ever?
I asked the same thing. Yes, I could repeat your question. Is it ever?
So we're going to do the backyard first.
Is there anyone putting their hand up to fix that little problem? It doesn't have to be finished by next year when we meet, but...
We're still missing a few of the roundtables and workshops, right?
I think.
Yeah, a few. So let's use this moment to stretch ourselves a little bit.
Yes.
If there's any more question to Lars, who's already waiting. You're not even waiting for your final round of applause. You can't do it like that. At least give him another hand.
It's a modest man, ladies and gentlemen. A modest man.